Welcome to the Resiliency of the Human Spirit podcast, where we share all about human triumphs for the collective's healing and empowerment. I'm your host, Priscilla Haley. My guest today is Armida Abreu. Armida is a spiritual life and relationship coach. She helps her clients overcome limiting beliefs, break behavioral patterns, create more freedom and choice over their mindset, and develop strong and healthier relationships. Her vision is to help people remove fear-based living through the power of self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-discovery. Her mission is for humanity to move beyond fear and separation and into love and oneness. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Armida on right now. Hi, Armida.
Hi, Priscilla. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us here today. So, Armida, I gotta say, I so love your mission to help humanity to move beyond fear and separation and into love and oneness. And I think that is so needed in the times that we're living in right now. I mean, you're one of the many, I'm sure, of the light workers. So I'm very happy to have you on here today. So we connected a few months ago where you shared your personal story and your journey through some personal hardships, which I would invite you to share later on, and also your spiritual awakening journey.
Mm.
So I will open the floor to you now, Armida, and have you share your personal journey with our audience and the lessons that you learned along the way.
Oh, I love that. So thank you so much once again for having me here. It's an honor for me to share my story because I realize that our stories are meant to empower us and not define us, right? And so my journey, wow, I mean, I think I in 2019, I'm going to start because that was a real pivotal year for me. That's when I realized that's when I was going through the Black Night of the Soul, but I didn't know I was going through a Black Night of the Soul till after I was on the other side. I was like, oh, that's what I was going through, spiritual awakening. And so in 2019, I found myself I was married. I had three kids. I had left corporate America the year before to help my then husband, launch a real estate business. And I have found myself in a space where I felt stuck. I felt like I was in a home surrounded by three kids, a husband, a dog, and yet I had never felt so alone and disconnected from my environment than I did. And I remember when I had that realization, like how heartbreaking it was for me at that moment, because I felt initially I went into that victim mentality, feeling like I didn't realize how much I was stuck in my stories. You don't realize that in the process, but I was really stuck in the stories of thinking like it was everyone else's fault, that I was unhappy. It was my husband's fault. It was, my kids' fault that I didn't have the time to do what I needed to do. The business wasn't thriving, the relationship was falling apart, and it was everybody else's fault but mine's, right? And that's from 2019 when I had that moment. I really had that breakdown moment that you see in movies and in TVs. I remember it was a cloudy day. I wrote actually a whole chapter about this in my published book. It's called Collaborations, Visionaries Share a New Way of Living. And it talks about this exact moment. So I remember I dropped off the kids to school. It was in March of 2019, before COVID. This was a year before COVID. And I remember I came home, it was cloudy. My office had like sliding windows. And I remember I felt so defeated. And I just walked into my office to work in my failing real estate business at that moment. And I just remember I looked at my office, I looked out the window, I saw the clouds, and I just dropped down on my knees and started crying, like literally crying, sobbing. I crawled into like a fetus position. I was just crying and crying and crying and crying. And I cried for, it seemed like hours. I don't know how long it was because I honestly didn't look at the time. But I remember looking out the window and just seeing, like, why am I feeling this way? Why is everything falling apart around me? Why? And asking the question why. And I had never done that. And I remember after I let it all out, all of a sudden I just stopped crying. And it's like all of a sudden I felt peace. It was really crazy how that happened. Like it felt really crazy to me in the moment, but now I know why it happened. I opened myself up to possibilities in that moment. And so I remember I felt the sense of peace. I went into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and I looked into when I looked at myself in the mirror for the first time, and since in that moment that I started crying, it almost felt like it was the first time that I actually saw my real self. Like I feel like I was finally vulnerable with myself in that moment. I had tried before that breakdown moment, I was pretending like everything, my marriage was fine, business was thriving, everything. I was putting on a persona of people pleasing and being what I thought everybody else wanted me to be. And in that breakdown moment, it's like I allowed myself to accept what was finally happening and to let go of what other people thought of me. And so when I looked in the mirror, it was really interesting because it was the first time that I feel like I connected with my actual soul. And I remember I looked at myself in the mirror, and it's so funny. I had a t-shirt on. My t-shirt was drenched from all the crying. And I looked in the mirror, and it's like it was the first time I really actually saw myself. And I remember getting goosebumps and feeling the sense of peace that everything was going to be okay. And in that moment, I realized in that moment, they always say when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and things just started to drastically unfold in my life. And I became aware of different books, different podcasts, different coaches that just the universe delivered into my awareness. And there were the exact things that I needed to start doing the inner work of really finding myself and accepting myself and really being able to feel that empowerment and give up the victim mentality that I had for so many years that I didn't even know I had until I had my spiritual awakening. I didn't realize that certain childhood traumas that I had experienced that I thought weren't affecting me were affecting me. I realized that because of those traumas, I had created a story around my worth, my values, what I deserved. And those were what subconsciously was running all of the decisions and things that I was doing in my life. And so in 2019, when I started to finally do the work of looking at myself in the mirror and not pointing the fingers and really looking at myself, that's when I started to change my energy, shift my personality. I started to take accountability for my life as opposed to pointing the finger. And that's when I really started to take my power back. And then 2019, I was going back and forth with all of that, doing all the inner work. There were moments where I thought I was going crazy because when you're going through a spiritual awakening, the ego does not want to let go. So you're in that in between, you're in a war with, but I know my soul, it feels right and authentic that resonates with me. But the ego is like, no, we're going to stay here because it's safe and we know what's going to happen. The ego means well, but it only makes decision based on the past and what's familiar. And it's trying to keep you safe, even if that past cost you pain, because it knows you're going to be safe. So you go through that battle of, when you're really, I say I went through a rebirth, really. Spiritual awakenings, it's a rebirth. You really, it's the soul, your ego has to die in order for your soul to then lead. And so I remember going through that process, and I was really dedicated because I was in so much pain and so much suffering. It's like somebody just took a rug from my feet and I just fell on my floor. But I did the work. I believed in myself. Something inside of me told me, like, this feels right. This resonates. This feels like this connection is where you need to go. So I trusted, I believed, I followed. It wasn't always pretty. I had many tears, a lot of processing of emotions that I had that I hadn't processed, a lot of forgiveness work around other people in my life, including myself, which was one of the hardest things I had to do. And then, of course, after I remember early 2020, right before COVID, all of a sudden, like I was just going through the motion of being present and being with my soul and not trying to get to a final destination. I looked out the window and I was like, wow, I'm a whole new person almost a year later. I felt alive. I felt connected. I felt I had passion. My relationships were all thriving, and no one outside of me did anything. I changed. And because I changed, all my relationships started to change and grow and evolve, and things in my life were flowing. And that's when I finally had the realization, like, how do I help? I've crossed this bridge. Now, how do I help others do this? Because now I know that it's nothing outside of us, that we are the cause and the effect of everything. And when we work on ourselves, which is where all of our power is, we have the power to affect everything outside of us, but we have to release the ego, and we have to really trust our soul and open up our hearts and be vulnerable first and foremost to ourselves. And then that reflects to everyone around us.
Nice. Wow, such a powerful journey. So you mentioned a couple things, ego and the victim mindset. So I guess it's safe to say a lot of people are still stuck in ego and stuck in the victim mindset. So what advice would you give to us to help us to be more conscious and aware of, and maybe also to release the victim mindset and ego structure? How do we do that?
The only way for us that I feel that really helps us release, for me at least, what worked and with my clients, when I work with my clients, is really forgiveness of others and forgiveness of selves. When you forgive others and when you forgive yourself, then that means you're accepting of whatever happened to you. And if you accept that whatever happened to you, and I experienced a lot of things in my childhood that, at a certain point in my life, I wish I hadn't been through that. But now I realize that all of that were there to teach me lessons so that I could find my soul and my connection to all. I feel like after my spiritual awakening, I realized we come here for growth and evolution. And part of our growth journey is experiencing that contrast so that we can find our authenticity and our truth and accept who we truly are. And so we go through a lot of different things in our lives that are not necessarily things that we want to experience. But the problem is we get stuck in the victim mentality, which only keeps us stuck in the contrast of what we don't want. And when we transform that energy and we can find peace, and that doesn't peace with whatever's happened and with the people it happened with and within ourselves, if we can find that peace and accept that, then we can release the victim mentality, because then we can say, all of this happened for a reason. And I may not understand that reason right now, but I know that if you can accept that, that empowers you, and now you're able to stand in your power. When you feel like people from your past have done you wrong, and that doesn't mean that those people have not, didn't do things to hurt you, but you realize that hurt people. Those people that hurt you weren't trying to hurt you on purpose. They were only projecting their pains and insecurities onto you because they didn't know how to process those emotions themselves to let them go, to show up in a place of love. And when you come to that realization, it's easy for you to release that. But I feel like if we don't stop, if we don't give up that victim mentality, we're always going to be a victim to our environment, and you'll never feel empowered, and you will never be able to transform and overcome your circumstances, because it takes you shifting your energy, shifting your mindset in order to create a new reality for yourself.
I understand. And you brought up a very important topic, forgiveness. So, from your perspective, what do you think forgiveness is and forgiveness is not? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about forgiveness.
Oh, yes, I was one of those people. I thought I had forgiven the people in my life who had done me wrong before I had my awakening. And I realized I hadn't really forgiven them. What I had done is really swept it under the rug and not dealt with it. Right. And sometimes we think if we're not dealing with something and it's not something we're thinking about 24/7, then it's done, it's resolved. But no, the energy, anything that's not any emotional trauma that we have, if we don't take the time to process and release that, it stays stuck in our energy field, and we need to release it through, I like to do with my clients a lot of becoming aware. So there's a lot of becoming aware of yourself, a lot of body work, body movement, to get you somatic work, to get you to release that energy so that it's just stuck in your energy field. And so to me, forgiveness is definitely not thinking that you're okay with it, but only because you're sweeping it under the rug and you're not dealing with it. And what forgiveness is for me is really accepting everyone and every person that has ever hurt you, including if you've been the person who has caused pain towards yourself. It's forgiven, and realizing that we are all doing our best and that we are all beings of love and that we didn't come here to hurt other people. When we hurt other people, it's because we're hurting ourselves, because I unintentionally was hurting people when I was feeling pain, and I didn't know I was hurting people. It wasn't until I became aware of myself. So to me, true forgiveness is being able to release that person or that situation and really truly making peace with it and saying, you know what, I know this happened. I know this person hurt me. And I know whatever situation happened in our lives, it's unfortunate that it happened, but realizing that those moments are meant to allow us to go deeper with ourselves. Because I feel like that's why we experience certain things in our lives, is to be able to really truly go deeper with ourselves and find our true voice and find our authentic self, because we forget who we are when we come here. And part of that journey of remembering who we are is really going through those situations that bring us back to who we truly are, which at the core, to me, is love, beings of love.
Yeah. As you were talking, I got a download, so I'm just gonna ask the question, okay? Um, for somebody who has had maybe their body violated by somebody else, right? How can that person find forgiveness for the other person? Because in their mind, they think like this person really hurt me, right? You
Right.
know that you were doing something wrong by violating my body. So
Right.
how can somebody in that situation find forgiveness for the other person?
I love, that's a great point. And actually, this brings me to one of my clients, actually, because this is a really, I think this really resonates with that. So it was actually when I have first started coaching. So it was actually early in 2020. I was still trying to figure things out. And of course, the universe sends me clients my way. I set those intentions that were meant to challenge me and to help me grow. So one of my first handful of clients that I started working with, she had experienced some sexual trauma in her childhood. And she thought, again, she had forgiven the person and she had moved on from it. And then, but she was still struggling in life. Like, she felt stuck. Her relationships were not thriving. And yet she thought she had forgiven the person, had no idea there was a connection. And she see me because she was just like, I can't do this anymore. And so during our session, of course, eventually, as we build trust and rapport, eventually that comes up. And as we work through that issue, what I told her and what I tell my clients when they experience something like this is that, again, hurt people hurt people. A lot of times perpetrators are people who have been perpetrated on themselves. And a lot of times it's the only thing we know. It does not make it right. And what they did, we never want to excuse anyone's behavior, right? Because there's such a thing as boundaries, especially for those people who are still in our lives and still showing up in a way that's not loving towards us. We can have love and compassion and not take it personal and forgive them, but that doesn't mean we don't create boundaries with the people. And that's part of the lessons that we need to learn, is to set boundaries with people in our lives. And so, which is, it's finding that balance can be tricky, but I love being able to help create that space for my clients, and it's something that I had to learn. But it's just realizing with her, like, sharing a little bit of her story, when we started to talk about it and it started to bring up all of these emotions, she was trying to dismiss them, like, no, that's old, that was from a long time ago. And when she finally went there, we were able to process it. And then I'll go back a little bit, she was able, like, she said she felt the freedom energetically, like when she went through the process that I put her through. Was I sat with her, we did some processing of things, and when she let it go, she was like, I felt that, like, it has finally left me, when she was able to talk about it from a way where she didn't see the person. She didn't see herself as a victim, because if you see yourself as your victim, you're not transforming the story, and
Mhm.
that person still has power over you, right?
Right, right.
The whole process of being able to come back to this, to say, yes, I was a victim, because as a kid, she was a victim. But as an adult, she's no longer a victim in this moment, not unless she decides to keep giving her power away to the perpetrator, right? So
Hmm.
it's not the trauma from our past that's affecting us in the future. It's the stories that we tell ourselves from the past that's truly affecting us. So when we can shift those stories to a way that empowers us, then we take our power back, and then those people don't have that power over us. So it was able for her, what finally, after 10, 15 years of going to therapy and working. She didn't even know there was a connection. We were able to connect that for her. She was able to finally release it. And, she's happy, she's thriving. Her relationship is in a great space. Her career started to get better. But it took for her to see herself not as a victim. Yes, you were a victim in that circumstance, but the person who perpetrated, if you think about it, they're also a victim because most likely they got perpetrated on. That's why it's learned behavior.
Right.
And so they've never had the time to process it. And again, we're not making excuses for them, but this is an unfortunate situation. How do we overcome this so that we can take our power back? We see the person as someone who's just hurt. We forgive them for their actions, and it takes courage to do that. It takes a lot of courage to do that. But when you can release that person, now you have your energy back. And now you can put that towards you, bring that energy back to you, take that power back away from that person. And, and then you can start really to thrive in your life. As long as you're in survival mode, which being a victim keeps you in survival mode, you will never be able to thrive. And then your story will define you instead of empowering you. And what better way to serve humanity than allowing your story to define you so that then you can be a beacon of light to help others who may be who have been through those experiences, help them overcome those things.
I think the important key here is compassion, having compassion for the other person, because we don't know what their background is, their childhood trauma. And like you say, it's true. Oftentimes they are just projecting their pain and their fear on somebody else. And so I wanted to ask you, you talked about processes that you went through with that specific client. Can you share with us the processes that you have for your clients to help
Yes.
them heal?
Absolutely. So a lot of the processes I like to say, so I have a 16-week program that I put my coaching clients through. It's all very intuitive. I have a blueprint of what I like to follow. To me, I like to say that I am a beacon. I'm connected to something bigger than me who is showing up through me, right? To provide the whatever the client needs. And so I surrender to the higher power and allow things to flow naturally. So even though I have a 16-week program and I have a blueprint, it's different for everyone because some people may need more time in certain areas. So I like to say there's 3 phases. The first phase is grounding. So that first phase is how do we get you grounded? A lot of times when clients are coming to me, they feel like a victim. They feel stuck. They feel alone. Their relationships are falling apart. They may be anxious. They're not sleeping well. They feel insecure. They don't have they lack passion. They lack, a sense of self-confidence, right? And it's like, okay, what are the things that are you telling yourselves that are creating all of this energy and stories in your life that are keeping you stuck? So the first phase is let's get you grounded, let's get you present, let's become aware of our unconscious belief and our unconscious patterns. And so that's the first step. Second step is once we become aware of those, now as we know, you cannot change the things that you're not aware of. So becoming aware of it allows you to now make different choices, to think differently, to be able to, okay, so a lot of times when we're stuck in that victim mentality, we're stuck it's like we're in the middle of a hurricane or a tornado and we're going around and around and around and around and around with the tornado. So how do we pull you into the eye of the tornado so that you can have a different view and a different perspective on things so that then you can shift your life? Because when you shift your energy, you shift your life, and it's really transforming your stories that's going to change everything in your life. And so that's the first phase. The second phase, so let's get you grounded, let's get you present. So now it's second phase, release. Let's release anything that's holding us back. So now that we know that we have all these stories and beliefs that are keeping us stuck, how do we transform them? How do we overcome them so that then we can create the love, the life, the relationships, the careers that we truly want? And then the second step is it's us creating new beliefs. Okay, so if you don't want this, what do you want to believe? And really getting you to do a lot of coming back into the body, coming back into the heart, coming back into love and compassion truly is the key to everything. And from the beginning, I tell my clients, like, this work is simple, but it's not easy because you have to keep reminding yourself each and every moment when your mind wanders and tries to bring you to that old story, being present enough to be able to become aware of the pattern and then choose differently so that you don't get caught up into the pulled back in with the tornado. So it's like, so second step is let's shift those stories, let's transform it. And then the last step is, okay, now that you've overcome your past, now that you have this new sense of confidence and you feel this sense of empowerment and you released all this baggage that's been sitting on your shoulders for so long, you feel free, you feel light, and now you can actually connect to who you authentically are. And when you accept yourself and you connect authentically to who you are, now you get to create your future however you want. What do you want in your relationships? What values do you have? What career do you really, it's something that will make you feel alive. What do you think, because when we're creating from fear and from a victim mentality, we're doing things to please others and not necessarily the things that we want to do. But when release all those stories and now we've connected authentically with ourselves, now you get to really create who you are and everything that you came here to be. And that's when you have the true freedom to be who you are. So that's really the process that I take my clients through.
Nice, so powerful. So, okay, I want to stay with the topic of forgiveness for just a little bit. So, what advice would you give to someone to help them forgive themselves? Now we're talking about forgiving themselves. If they're in a space of self-loathing, self-hatred, guilt, shame for something that they think they've done that is so horrible.
Right. So this is something that I work through a lot. So I have a lot of experience on this, especially, and I'll go back a little bit because I think it's really important. When I came from, my parents separated when I was really young, and they hated each other and they used to speak really badly about each other. And as a child, I got to experience that. Right. So I was like, when I get married, my kids are not going to go through that. And I'm going to create this beautiful environment for my kids. And, so needless to say, when back in 2019, when I decided that I had my spiritual awakening, my soul led me into a path that didn't involve me being in a relationship with my now ex-husband, whom is my absolute best friend and supports
Nice.
all of my work because he's transformed a lot from the work that I've done. That's the beautiful thing. When you do this work on yourself, your energy affects other people. You create a space for the people around you to let their guard down. Your light lifts them up. So you'll notice when you start to do this work that as you work on yourself, your energy affects the people around you in such a powerful way. It's beautiful. But going back to the question, I don't want to lose track of and so I remember here it was 2019, going through my Black Night of the Soul spiritual awakening, thinking, feeling shame, guilt, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to put my kids exactly through the same thing that I went through. I'm over here. I know this marriage doesn't feel right for me because that's what happened when you go through a spiritual awakening. I have a whole different career. I'm not in that relationship anymore. I'm moved out, sold my house. It's like everything in my life changed, right? And so I remember having that shame and that guilt and really having to work through it. And what I realized, what helped me and what I know helps my client work through this is realizing that we are only doing our best at every moment. And I know I had a lot of shame and guilt around the way that I was parenting my kids because I realized that it was a lot fear-based tools that I was using with my kids because that's what I knew, right? That's how I was raised, right? And so I realized when I started to become aware of myself, how I was showing up for my kids and how much that also affected me and how I didn't want to be and show up anymore. And so those two things really helped me like have love and compassion. Really, I had to learn to love myself unconditionally, to have compassion for myself unconditionally, to release judgment of myself, complete judgment, and realize like I'm only human. I'm only doing my best. And me 5 years ago was only doing her best. Me yesterday was only doing my best. At each and every single moment, we could only do our best. And that's going to look different each day and even each moment. So being able to forgive ourselves is really releasing judgment. and really truly accepting that we're human. We're not meant to be perfect. If we came here for growth and evolution, guess what? Perfectionism is an illusion. That's a way of keeping, that's a word that keeps us stuck, you know? And so realizing that it's not about what we've done and what we've experienced and the decisions that we're making, how they may hurt other people. It's about finding ourselves, following that authenticity, and realizing that the decisions that we're making now, it's what matters. So if we're aware of things, decisions that we made in our past that may have hurt other people, things that we've done in our past that may have hurt other people, and being able to say, you know what, I was only doing my best. At the end of the day, we're here for love and connection, and that's all we could ever do. And if we can create that space of releasing the judgment and really allowing ourselves to accept what is, it really helps us a lot. And that helps you not only release that guilt and the shame from things we may have done in the past, but it allows us then to follow our true authentic self in the future, right? Because you're always going to make decisions that are going to affect other people. And if we hold on to shame and guilt, guess what? Your life, you're going to be living it for other people and not for yourself. And you have to learn how to live for you, because true freedom comes from you being able to follow your truth.
I love that. I like what you said. I'm doing my best. That's what I tell myself too. I'm only doing my best in every moment. And I tell myself I'm learning. If I make a mistake, I'm learning. It's okay. I'm learning. So
I
I
love.
think the key is compassion and kindness for the self, right?
Right. Right. It's realizing, like, we that's all we could ever do. It's just show up with love and compassion and do our best, and realizing that it's telling ourselves a different story even with mistakes. Like, I don't think nothing is a mistake, because everything that we experience is helping us grow. So if you can
Exactly.
look at those things in your life that you think they're a mistake, or you think there's something, they're just feedback of something you may want to do differently. But guess what? If you not had made that so-called mistake, you would have never known that that's not something that you want to do in the future, right? So we
Right.
almost need a contrast to get clarity on where we want to go. So it's realizing that those moments are offering us a space for growth.
Yeah, I so agree. When we're in a situation that we don't prefer, it's still serving us because it's showing us that this is something we don't prefer so that we can choose something that we do prefer, right?
I love that. I love that. We have such a like, we get stuck in the contrast and forget that contrast is only there to help us get clarity.
Hmm.
We can change if we can look at those circumstances or situations in our life with an open mind and open heart, with love and compassion, and we can be open to possibility. Oh man, that's where we grow. I like to say that, I tell my clients, and even now, the things that challenge us are the things that help us grow the most, because those are the things, when anything outside of us is triggering us, there's always something unhealed within us, and they bring us back to that belief, that story that we're telling ourselves about those situations that we can work through. And so I feel like when we can learn, and it's a process, it's not something that happens overnight. It took me a while to figure this out, but when we can learn to have gratitude for everything in our lives, even those things that challenge us, that's how we overcome them, because that's when you get to transform the story. You can't fix the problem with the same mind that created it. How do you
Right.
overcome it? How you overcome it? You got to overcome it. It's you shift it and you change it. And guess what? That change, that expands you.
Right. I want to ask you this question. I think we talked about this before we got on. What advice would you give to someone if they were in a family with strict cultural or religious beliefs? How can they learn to stand in their power and authenticity?
I love this because I thrive on relationship coaching. It's one of the things, it's what I love to do, working with couples, and it doesn't have to be necessarily couples. I work with the mom and daughters relationship. And so for me is being able. So here's the thing, if you don't fully accept yourself, you will never be able to fully accept another human being. So first and foremost, it's about you fully loving and accepting yourself. That's what's going to create the space for you to do that for others, right? So I think in relationships, and when you come from family, that certain things there's a difference in opinion, right? It could be
Right.
political, it could be religious, it could be with so many things, right? It's being able to know who you are, to love yourself authentically and with compassion so that you can hold that space for other people. And it's about you honoring your truth while holding space for their truth, because their truth is just as real to them as your truth, right? So now it's my truth, it's your truth, but how can we live in an environment where we are growing together? And that's how we do that. It's accepting ourselves, loving ourselves, and creating that space where, okay, I know who I am. I'm going to honor my truth. I'm going to stand authentically for who I am. And you can do that with love and compassion, and learning how to set boundaries with the people that we love is important. You know, people have a bad relationship with boundaries, and they're so important. Boundaries is a blueprint to show others how you want to be treated. Because if life is all about perspective, the way you might want to be treated, it's not necessarily how somebody else might want to be treated. And I always say that in any relationship, you cannot get mad for not getting what you want if you're not clearly articulating that with the people in your life. So it's about teaching the people that are in your environment how to treat you, but you don't do that by telling them, trying to change them and manipulate them. You do that by the way you're showing up, because your energy will affect them. And there's a lag period, right? When you start doing this work, but you hold that love, you hold that compassion, you release judgment, and you start to set boundaries with people in your life as you may need to. And it may look like at the beginning, you can't, conversations come up that feel out of alignment. You may have to dismiss yourself, but
Mhm.
stop participating in conversations that are causing disconnect, right? Try to communicate to understand each other and to bring closeness, not to disconnect, right? Because we have this thing in relationships where we want to prove our point and make someone wrong, right? It's your idea is wrong, my idea is wrong. But guess what? When you're pointing the finger at somebody else, you're shaming and you're shaming that other person, right?
Right.
And so that their guard goes up and we're not getting anywhere. Let's release judgment. Let people be where they are, accept them where they are. And then you create the boundaries necessary to keep the flow in the relationship, however it may need to.
Love that. And I just want to point out sometimes stepping away from family relationships is also healthy. That it's okay if you need to step away for a little while.
Absolutely. As I started this journey, first of all, I needed, in order for me to find my soul, I needed to disconnect. So I did a lot of soul searching while I was in solitude, you know? So I
Hmm.
respectfully removed myself and created my own little space as I was allowing myself to process and release and transmute all of this energy that I had stuck in my body that I had no idea. And as I did that, I still kept some connections, and some connections fell apart, and some of those connections came back, and some of them didn't. But that's okay. We're all here walking different paths, and we have to learn to respect our own journey and other people's journey. And we have to learn to meet people where they are without needing to change them. I said the minute we try to change the people in our lives by force, by manipulation, that creates disconnect within any relationship. And so we don't want to do that. And sometimes, yeah, we need to step away from friendships, relationships, romantic relationships, intimate relationships, friendships, anyone in our lives who's not, who we feel are not respecting us and showing up in a way that feels safe. I like to say safe, right? Because respect can look so different. If we don't feel safe, it's okay to disconnect so that you can start to work on yourself and create those boundaries within yourselves. Because interesting enough, when you do this work, and this is what I learned, is that when you really sit with yourself and you start to really hone in your worthiness and what you deserve, it's almost like people energetically connect to your boundaries. You don't have to verbally speak your boundaries because your energy connects that and conveys
Right.
that information. It's so interesting how that happens.
I like that. So, okay, let's move on to your business.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about your business and the services that you offer to the collective. I know you said you have a 12-week program.
Yes. Yes. So I have a 16-week program. It
Oh,
used to be
16.
12.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a 16-week program that I take my one-on-one clients through. And so I talked a little bit about that. There's three phases. It's the grounding, becoming aware of ourselves is the second phase is, okay, how to release and transmute the energy. And the third step is like, okay, now that I know who I truly am, this is the fun part. Let's create, who am I? Who truly am I? What truly lights me up? What do I value in relationships? Right now, you really get to connect to what's real for you and what feels authentic for you, and that brings a lot of joy and a lot of freedom. And then I have with my couples, when I work with couples, I also work with the couples, it's 24 weeks because I do a little bit longer. Yeah, I do a little bit longer to hold that space for them. And well, and usually it's the way I work with my couples is that I meet with them separately at first to get them to work through any childhood stuff separately that may come up. And then once they've done that, they have grounded, they have released, let's bring them together. Let's work through anything that's any resentment that's been brought up through the relationship, right? So this is the fun part. And I really love working with clients through this because I get to see them like, show up with that energy of bringing everything up. And then you get to see them light up and reconnect once they release all that resentment.
Right.
So it's like, okay, let's work on this separately. Let's come together, work through any issues that are going on within the relationship. And then let's recreate the relationship. I feel like a lot of times a lot of people haven't been taught what a healthy relationship looks like. We're modeling what we believe it's what needs to get done in order to have a healthy relationship, not necessarily what's true for us. Everyone has different values. So then I take my clients through a process. What do you value? What's important to you in a relationship so that you can then have these conversations, right? And be real and be intimate with one another, because intimacy doesn't, people think intimacy, it's in the bedroom. Intimacy begins with everything you do outside of the bedroom. So that's why I take my clients through that process of working individually. You need to be vulnerable with yourself first before you can be vulnerable with another.
Right.
So that's why I do the individual at first, because you need to open up to yourself and be real to yourself so that when we start working as a couple and we start doing the work together, you can then hold that love and that compassion for each other, because that's what's going to create teamwork. Like, we're not here to point the finger, because who's right and who's wrong is so subjective. It's I love you, you love me, there's an issue. How can we resolve that in a way that works for us? And how can we communicate? And takes us being vulnerable, asking for what we want. A lot of us are afraid of asking for what we truly want in a relationship, and we want a partner to magically know what our needs are, right?
Mind readers.
Yeah. I'm guilty of that. I was guilty of that before. Like, he should know better, right? And it's like, no, because, when you learn, I used to be one of those people who used to say, that's common sense. Well, I don't say that anymore, because that's a judgment. What's common sense to me may not be common sense to others. And depending how our upbringings are, things are different. We all look at life differently. And so being able to hold that's why accepting people for who they are and not trying to change them is the number one way for you to get them to really let their guard down. Because when people feel accepted, they can truly start to embody who they are, and they don't have to pretend to be someone they're not. And that's when relationships that, tend to get lost and disconnected, because now we're pretending to be someone we're not. Then our real persona comes out, and then now we're pointing the finger and judging each other, right? And so I take my clients through that process of being able to reconnect and ask for what they want. Like, really, what motivates you. You have to speak up for yourself. I truly believe that a healthy relationship with anyone in our lives begins with us honoring first and foremost ourselves, and then honoring that person's truth, and then being able to speak up for what we want. Like, being able to hold our own and speak our truth, and ask for what we want and what we deserve, and do that with love and compassion, not trying to force someone to do something for us.
Right. So, where can people find you if they want to connect with you and work with you?
Awesome. Thank you. So they can find me at divinegrowthcoaching.com. That's my website. I am on social media. I am on Facebook as Divine Growth Coaching, on Instagram, my Armida Abreu as well. Either one works. And I am on Instagram as just Armida Abreu. I did open up a Divine Growth Coaching business page, but for some reason I haven't done much with it, but people can go there to find me.
Wonderful. And I'll put all that in the show notes. So one last thing, I think you also have a special gift for the audience today.
Yes, yes, I do. You got any of of our listeners who are here, if you're interested in downloading, I have a workbook that's called 5 Steps to Manifesting the Life of Your Dreams. It's really a workbook to get you to reflect, to get you to look at things from a different perspective, because that's what's going to get you to open up. And I feel like when we open to possibilities, we open up to life. And so I feel like this workbook is meant to do that. And you can go to my website at divinegrowthcoaching.com to download the workbook. Yeah.
Cool. I'll put that in the show notes as well. So we have a couple minutes left, and I have a signature closing question here that I ask all my guests. So I'll ask you the question now. What is your closing message for humanity to help in our collective healing and empowerment?
I think I feel like, oh, this is a beautiful one, but I feel like for me is, we want to change the world by changing everyone and everything outside of us. And that's us trying to change the effect, not realizing that we're the cause. And so the best way to serve humanity is for you to work on yourself, for you to love yourself, for you to accept yourself. Because when you truly do that, it really changes your perspective and it opens you up to connect to all of your environment. I feel like I am at a place right now where life is happening not only for me, but through me. For the longest time, I felt like a victim and I felt like life was happening to me. And when I started to do this work and I realized that life was not only happening for me, but it was happening through me, it allowed me to then have that love and that compassion for other people, which I think it's the rule. I think a lot of our wars, a lot of political stuff that's going out there, it's because we want to point fingers. We're stuck in this fear mentality, and we fear the things that we don't know. And so when we can know ourselves and we can trust ourselves and we can see ourselves in others, then it opens you up to this beautiful space of you no longer feel like it's you and them, it's we, right? Like I don't see myself separate from anyone else in the world. I see myself in everyone that I see. I see myself in the birds, in my environment and everything, because I know that if I am an extension of source, and everything that's here, it's an extension of source, then we're all connected, right? And it's not until we start to see that life it's working with us and we start co-creating with life, we will never truly feel freedom. But there's nothing outside of you that you need to change, and you just need to, and there's nothing inside of you need to change. You just need to really truly love and accept who you are. And that opens up the door for possibilities and for life to start really flowing for you, because life is already happening. But your resistance to life, it's what's keeping you stuck. And it's not until you can truly love and accept yourself that then you start to co-create with life.
Yes, I love that. And I just want to add with quantum physics,
Mm.
with the light particles being, what's that term? Entangled,
Yep.
right? Entangled. So we're all entangled with each other, with everything around us. And so I just want to say, if you're being mean to somebody else, you're actually being mean to yourself, right? Because we're all one,
Right.
essentially.
Absolutely. We're always projecting. So when this is why release and judgment is so important towards ed. That's one of the things that I take my clients through at the beginning as we start. How do you become aware of your thoughts? And I'll leave this like to our listeners. How do you start? Because you may ask yourself, how do I start becoming aware of my thoughts, unconscious thoughts and thinking? Write down, take out your phone, keep a note, write, keep a journal, and anytime you catch yourself complaining, judging, or criticizing yourself, another person, or a situation in your life, just write it down. Just write it down. Don't do anything with it. Just write it down, and you'll see. Then you'll keep track and you'll be able to see of how much judgment and resistance you have towards life. And if you don't learn to release that, that's what's going to keep you stuck.
Love that. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared with our audience today. I have no doubt it's going to help a lot of people to maybe just get the higher perspective on life. So thank you for that, Armida.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to serve humanity. I know that I was once in a place where I felt stuck. I felt like a victim, and I know how transforming those stories and being where I'm at has drastically changed my life. And that's now my goal and my vision. It's to help humanity overcome fear and really learn to open up to love and who we truly are. At our core, that's what we are. That's why we crave love so much, because it resonates with our soul and with everything that we are and everything that really is. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. I love that. For everybody who's watching and listening, thank you for your time. And until next time, bye for now.